Welcome to episode 64 of Masters of the Forge. It's Adam here, and Jason is moving, so he's really busy getting moved in and getting all his stuff set up, so he doesn't really have time to work with the podcast right now. So we're having one episode where we'll have an interview with Doug Johnson, who gave us the F.A.T mats to use for our campaign. And also we'll have some story time later. I wrote up a narrative, kind of synopsis of the campaign, which I hope you'll listen to. It's not a proper short story, but it reads like one. It's more of a series of small vignettes, which I know that the creative writing isn't exactly everyone's favorite part of the show, but I hope you'll at least give it a try, because it was fun to write, and I think it turned out pretty well. Now, before we move into the show, I want to remind everyone of the Nova Open Foundation, which is coming to a close on its raffles for charity. I know this is a great opportunity for wargamers of all stripes to come together and show that we can make a difference in the world and show that we care. And I think there are some really great foundations that the Nova Open Foundation that are supporting, and you get a really great return on investment with these charities. They've all been selected very deliberately, and they're all really good causes. Also, I just want to let you know that next week we'll have episode 65, which is about The Beast Arises, The Last Wall by David Annandale. And then episode 66 will be an interview with David Annandale, which are already recorded. I hope you're looking forward to that. Then after that, for episode 67, we're going to have a discussion on dreadnoughts, dreadnoughts in the lore. And then 68 will be an episode on dreadnoughts on the tabletop. We're going to have some new content for you, some detachments and formations, and maybe a couple new units, and also some other ways of bringing the dreadnought to your tabletop. So I'm really looking forward to a return to that content, and I hope you are too. Right, so let's get a listen to the Nova Open commercial one last time, then we'll move into the show.
The Nova Open Charitable Foundation, NOCF, is proud to announce the opening of the 4th summer season on the 1st of July 2016. The Nova Open created the NOCF to promote the compassionate force of the worldwide community of tabletop wargamers and their willingness to support these causes. Since its inception, the NOCF worked with the miniature wargaming community to raise over $60,000 for charities such as Doctors Without Borders and the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. You can help by purchasing tickets for a range of raffles for armies and miniatures painted by world-class artists. There is a $10 minimum at checkout. Take your chances on any one or all of the nearly 20 online raffle items. Participants can purchase unlimited tickets at $1 per ticket for the following: the Bad Moon Squadron Orc Army, which is the NOCF Premier 2016 Consortium Army, Nova Marines Adeptus Astartes Space Marine Army, Mjolnir Space Marines Army, Flames of World War II Soviet Tank Company. In addition, only 750 tickets are available at $2 per ticket for the following special raffles: Infinity Achilles Limited Edition 10th Anniversary Edition Miniature, Horus Heresy Pride of the 14th Legion Detachment, X-Wing the Emerald Empire ships. Also, only 750 tickets are available at $2 per ticket for single model prizes. NOCF will raffle 11 models that winners can have delivered to their homes. Buyers can take a look at the models on the NOCF website. They will be shipped to the winner anywhere on the planet with deliverable address. Note that most armies include a storage case donated by KR Multicase. See the website for specifics. Help the mission, spread the word, share the newsletter, blog post, web post, Facebook away. Together we can make this the best fundraising year ever. Tickets for these raffles sell quickly, so make sure you pick up your ticket today. If you have additional questions, please email novacharities@gmail.com. To donate, visit our website at novaopenfoundation.org. Thanks for helping to make a difference.
All right, welcome back. And now instead of being alone in the recording studio, I have Snorre.
Hello.
And Doug Johnson from TABLEWAR fame. What's up, Doug?
What's up, guys?
Oh, Doug, I had so much fun on our trip to England. We got to know each other pretty well. And, you know, everybody over there had a great time. Thanks a lot for joining us. That was really cool.
Oh, that was a blast. I still have a little bit of a beef towards you on that trip because you were wearing that hat the whole trip, which was awesome. Uh-huh. And then the day of salute, when you needed it the most, you didn't wear it.
Yeah, that was not good foresight on my part. Absolutely not.
I'll just find him in the crowd here. He'll be wearing his hat. Nope.
Yeah, I'm so sad that I couldn't be there.
Oh, wow. We're sad you couldn't be there too, buddy. Absolutely. We need to do it again sometime.
Yeah, next time we'll meet I think it's probably going to be me doing a bit of a trip through the U.S. and visit you and visit San Francisco again, and maybe some friends up in Washington.
That would be really awesome. Shoot, you could land here. We could do some New York stuff, and I'll go to San Fran with you. That is, if the stars align financially with that.
You're gonna do that around a big GT? Yep. You're gonna hit LVO and then do that, or?
I think it almost has to. However, there is a little stick in the mud there for those plans because from what I understand, the 40K cruise is going to be a Caribbean cruise in 2 years. And my wife and I generally go every other year at this point. Ooh. On a Caribbean cruise. So I'm like, well, why don't I just do that? So we'll see how that works out. But anyways, we're actually here to talk about a specific topic. I'm going to start off by thanking you profusely for the donation of the F.A.T mats for our campaign. That was really, really cool of you. We used the crap out of them, and we continue to use the crap out of them. They really, really helped immerse us in the story, and it was a great deal of fun using them and designing the Zone Mortalis board around them. It was great.
No problem. I saw the pictures. They looked like you guys were having a blast.
Yeah, we were kind of learning Zone Mortalis as we went, doing this campaign. It was kind of the point of it, really. And from a gaming perspective, and it really worked really well. And I must say, I'm pretty impressed at, we had F.A.T mats before. They were kind of a no-brainer for the club, and I bought one or two for myself, and my buddies bought some, and the store bought some, and some of the first run, we have a space one and whatever, mm-hmm. And but I never really appreciated what actually went into the design until I started building the Zone Mortalis table around it. Because I was pretty impressed with the fact that, like, every feature seemed to be on the inch. You know what I'm saying? Like, mm-hmm. There were certain features that were, this is, like, exactly 5 inches here. I guess, and everything really seemed to fit and work together when I was building the walls. I didn't have to guess as far as, like, was that, like, this and a quarter or this and a third. Everything seemed to be, like, logically laid out. Did you use CAD for that, or?
No, I just design those, and then I work with we actually have, I have some artists now, so there's some, a lot of the mats I did myself, but yeah. Now, as things are progressing, I've brought on some of my artist buddies from the video game industry, because I used to be in the video game industry. Mm-hmm. So working with them and just designing out the layout. So, it's a very, the board has a lot of options, right? There's just depending on where you have the walls, giving you options for different wall scenarios and stuff like that. So it seems like you're playing a different game even on the same mats. So yeah, a lot of work went into that. So it's nice to hear somebody acknowledge that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it you guys put a lot of effort into having the kind of the shapes and stuff on there that you could work with. Like you can put scenery, like there's some circle pieces that you can use to put like pipe machinery coming out of if you want to, some rectangular stuff. There's stuff that looks like doors. You could use those as kind of objectives. For one of our missions, for example, we used the large numbered shapes. I figure those are generally meant as like landing pads or whatever. Instead, we use those as cargo lifts. And then next to those, there's things that actually look like cargo lifts. And we used all 4 of those as different lifts. And the mission was you had to like get from one lift to the other while at the same time meeting in the middle and having combat. And I thought that was a lot of fun.
You're talking about the industrial mat?
Yeah, that was on the industrial mat, that one mission.
Now, the industrial mat, for the listeners, the industrial mat, like the Urban Combat 1, has the hidden deployment lines with the with the newspapers and the roadsides and stuff like that, just so people know as well.
Yeah, that is really clever. And you know, I know you might be surprised to hear we definitely did use the Zone Mortalis. We used both mats for Zone Mortalis, and it worked just fine.
That's awesome.
I know you guys intentionally designed the Underforge for Zone Mortalis, but in actuality, both of them worked perfectly.
Well, they both, I play Necromunda on both as well.
That's not surprising.
Yeah, they work pretty well. And on the 4x4. If you use a 4x4 and we even do War Machine on the Underforged one as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that and War Machine, you could almost not even put terrain down with the mats you guys have. And actually, don't you have actual War Machine mats now?
Yeah, we are working with Privateer Press now, so we have a line of 4x4s, and the new 30 inches will be coming out too. That we're going to be working with them for their skirmish system. That's awesome. I actually just picked up an army and been building it and painting. I joined a league down here just to play, try a new. My New Year's resolution was learn new games and play more games outside. I love 40K. It's my favorite, and I love 30K. But to go and learn some other stuff. So Infinity, War Machine, I play Malifaux. So just kind of getting out there and testing everything. And of course, I'm a huge X-Wing player. So
Right, yeah, and I want to kind of extol the virtues of the F.A.T mat a little bit again. I know a lot of people have heard about it, how it's really nice to roll dice on. It's really easy on the models. It's easy to put away, all those things, and the designs are beautiful. I think there are a couple qualities that folks don't touch on that I'd like to touch on here. One of them is the fact that I know a lot of clubs and I know a lot of tournaments are often stuck with 2.5 or 3 foot by 6 foot or 8 foot tables. And they generally, if you put a cloth mat down, you're putting it on 2 tables stuck together, and you're going to get a pretty dastardly crease in the middle of your game table, which can bunch up and stuff like that. We have found that the F.A.T mat is just the cure for that problem. You almost, if your venue has enough tables, you don't need any other table covers. You don't need wood table covers if you have F.A.T mats. That's one really massive virtue of the F.A.T mat.
That's true. Yeah, the grip underneath, put a little weight with the terrain and stuff on it, and you don't get those seams like you do with regular cloth or felt.
Right, exactly. And with cloth or felt, you kind of have to, if you're not hemming it, you're replacing it in a year or two. because of the frayed edges that you get with cloth. That's something I've been kind of dealing with some of our stuff. Another virtue I think is people think they're a little pricey. I mean, compared to cloth, it's I guess it is, but compared to anything else, it's definitely not. And one thing that I want to encourage people to do is if you're only in the budget for one fat mat or something like that, think about all the kind of things you can do with it. So we did have the virtue of having the Underforged fat mat, but we were able to make a Zone Mortalis board out of 2 of your mats, not just the industrial one, but also the Blasted Wasteland, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
What we did with that one, as my buddy has one of those, we took a bunch of vehicles, 40K vehicles, Orc and Space Marine vehicles, and we piled them up like piles of junk. And we made a big scrapyard battle out of it. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and if you want to get like the grassy one, there's nothing stopping you from making like a Zone Mortalis board out of that either. I have considered actually getting a bunch of ancient ruins terrain, making some kind of flat like some flat flooring, and actually using a space mat and putting the ancient ruins on the space mat with a bunch of bridges, and just making it look like the space mat are these space canals over some strange terrain, like call it like weird dangerous terrain or something like that.
And also, if you're going for ancient terrain, also, or ancient ruins kind of thing, then also the Iron Kingdoms is a really nice one.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
And I play all of my board games and card games on them too,
mm-hmm.
right? And they're just a great playing mat. I mean, if you take you mentioned the pricing. If you take, for example, a Magic the Gathering game mat for $15-$20. If you calculated that out to the size of our mats would be $250. So
absolutely,
and ours come with the canvas bag and the bag tag, which is nice as soon as you start collecting more than one.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I love the new design of the new bags. If anybody originally bought a bag from back in the way back when it first came out, you'll be happily surprised to see that the new bags are you guys have improved on those quite a bit. Really
well, the funny
nice.
thing with that is the initial bag was just a transport bag. It wasn't supposed to be a nice keep bag. They kind of updid it to give it that feel of like, oh wait, hey, this is a nice bag. It was just supposed to be a plastic bag that they put it in initially. Mm-hmm. So, and we wanted to do a canvas bag later anyways. So once we switched that, so now everybody listening that has the old one but doesn't have the new bag, they can order it on Frontline.
Okay, cool.
And get one of the newer, nicer bags.
That's cool. Yeah, those are really nice. It works out really well. Now, I must say that I'm really jealous of some of these other new mats that are coming out, and I'm probably going to be picking up a couple. The last one for 40K that I can recall was the lava mat. I have designs in my head of doing like a Mustafar. Which Star Wars movie was that? The Episode 3.
Episode 3, yeah.
Do one of those with like some landing pads and some like maybe like a little volcano on the side with some like catwalks and stuff.
Yeah, but then you need to get the Alpine mat, and then you can do like a Hoth battle on it.
Yeah, there you go.
and then you can have a Fire and Ice 40K match.
My gosh.
Add the swamp in there, and then you have Dagobah.
Dagobah, there you go.
Yep. And there's really a game mat for everything. And it like I said, if you're like me and you've got only so much room for things, and you want to have lots of different elements to your games, and you want to have lots of different games to play. Like if I want to do a jungle, my same old brown cloth table mat really isn't going to cut it if I'm doing a narrative campaign. I'm going to want the jungle mat or the swamp mat that I can use to spice things up a little bit. And all you have to do is roll it up, you know? And that's really the key.
If you're using those nice carry bags, then if you don't want them sticking or like stored outside, then they're not that big, so you can always just chuck them in the back of your closet or something. They're really easy to store.
Now they're the size of a poster tube, just 4 feet long. If you get the 4 foot by 6 foot and 4 foot by 4 foot, the bag ends up being 4 foot long. Or if you get the 3x3, because we do have 3x3 mats too, those are 3x3 bags as well. That's
cool. Now I hate to stomp on anybody's feet out there, but I think I wanted to. Unless you want to talk about something more about the campaign there, Snorre, I kind of want to bend your ear on a couple suggestions, Doug.
Sure.
I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but I think like a cavern dungeon type mat would be really, really great. I think for D&D and stuff.
That might already be on the list somewhere.
Oh, well, how do you do?
I can neither confirm nor deny that statement, and you can use this against me to blackmail me later, but
that's awesome.
That might be on a list. Problem is the list is long. The list is long, and we've been working hard. That's why I brought in the new artist, and that's another reason why my New Year's resolution to try these other games is everything Tablewar makes is something I wanted for myself. To be honest, I started with the Tablewar cases because I wanted a different way to transport my army, and then when you have a battle wagon that blows up on the other side of an APOC table, and you got to carry over a handful of orcs, that's how the Tablewar trays started, right? I just had 10 trays with magnetized orcs on it, and I'm like, well, how do I do a case like this? And that's how the cases started. And then playing, and when the Games Workshop plastic tables came out, I guess in my old age, clanking noises and I get irritated easily with annoying noises or whatever, and the dice rolling on them, what kind of bugged me. So that's where the mat idea came in, because I was always playing Magic and other games on the mouse pad type material. I'm like, why isn't anybody doing this? I'm going to do this. I want a big table of this, I mean, I would just sit there playing Magic, and I'd just be rolling 20-sided dice on it all the time. And I'm like, So I'd grab my 6-sided dice, and I was rolling it. And that's kind of how the F.A.T mat started. So that's kind of how I get my inspiration by, I'm a gamer at heart, and I love gaming. So I get out there and I play, and if I see something that nobody else has made, I look into making it. So
that's a really great attitude, Doug. That's what I forgot his name, but the nice gentleman from KR Multicase, he said basically the same thing. If you see something that nobody's doing and you're pretty sure everyone would want, that's an opportunity.
Huge opportunity.
You should take that opportunity, because you're the only one who can actually make it happen, because you're the one with the idea. And that's good advice for anybody out there who thinks they have a great idea. The only way you can do it is to try, and maybe succeed and maybe fail,
I would suggest everybody research hard into it before they do it.
Yeah,
you can lose a ton of money trying to do it, but wasting money on patents that aren't going to go through, or follow your heart. I mean, if there's something other like-minded gamers are going to want, and that's how the Tablewar case started, because I was doing it, and all of my friends and everybody at the league wanted them. So I'm like, okay, this is a good idea. I'm gonna go for it. So, and actually my business partner, Todd at Tablewar, is the one that's like, yeah, we've got to do this. We've got to make these cases. All right, let's do it. And then the mats came out after that. And, now there's other new stuff in the pipe. So.
Good. And you also kind of did the bit of the market research by making a Kickstarter of these mats.
Yeah, we did that. Well, I did the Kickstarter. My first Kickstarter was for the mini case. So we had the full-size case and the half-size case. And then all the artists and all my art friends wanted a mini case they could travel on planes with. And, it's just a great size for skirmish game type stuff too. So just to test out Kickstarter, because we had to do all, molds for those plastics aren't cheap. So I'm like, all right, well, let's see how interested people are, because the mini case is quite a bit smaller than the half, but not a huge amount, right? So I just wanted to make sure, I wanted to test the waters, make sure everybody was interested in it. And that was a success. And at that time, when that Kickstarter was going, I was, researching everything about the mats and figuring out the different materials, thicknesses, stuff like that. What did we want at this size? How much was it going to weigh? At first, you're talking, the big mouse pad type thickness. And then when you put that in a 6 foot by 4 foot, it's way too big or too thin. And then it gets all wrinkled. So a lot went into that before we pulled the trigger even on the Kickstarter on that one. Because I wanted to know, this is something I would be happy with. This is something that I could keep. And if I bought this at this X price, I would buy a bunch of them. If I would do it, then I hope other people would too. And it worked out.
Yeah, I don't think you have a problem with people buying your product at this point. I mean, it's really proven itself, and everybody loves it. And like I said, we've got a bunch of them, and it's for our listeners. It's really a great way to to immerse yourself in your narrative games without having to spend a boatload of money or spend a boatload of time working on it. I mean, just think of your time and how much that time is worth, and how much time away from your family is worth, to be honest. I mean, you don't even have to think about the hour, the money per hours you're spending at work. Think about how much more valuable your time with your family is than that even. And I think you come to the conclusion that you got a really good product here, and people should check it out.
Falls in the same category as one of my friends summarized the price of Games Workshop's miniatures. Yes, if you just look at the cost, they are kind of expensive, but just look at the number of hours of enjoyment you get out of building, painting, and playing with them.
Exactly, and if you don't want to build up your own, and I understand the appeal of doing a diorama style table too.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I have a couple, right? But if you want to get into the game, you play at your friend's house sometimes, your house sometimes, you lugging around all these big boards or tables, it gets tough.
Yeah.
I got a mat, you buy the F.A.T mat, you got a beautiful mat that you roll out, and it's got an image on it. I love the way the dice roll on it. I can't stop saying that. That's like my favorite thing. I can't not sit there and roll dice on it. If I'm not playing a game rolling dice, I'm like, if the table's out, and I use it like a big giant mouse pad in my gaming room too, right? I got my laptop on it. It's just a big giant mouse pad. So it's a little expensive for just to be a mouse pad, but as a gaming system,
yeah,
it's pretty
that's
good.
Great. Hey, speaking of that, have you guys considered doing a rolling box?
A dice tower?
Like no, not a tower, but a box for rolling.
It's tough because if you have the mat, you don't need it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I get a little annoyed sometimes. My friend has his box, his dice rolling box that he'll bring, and on my side of the table, a lot of times I can't see the dice because of the edge. And I'm like, just roll on the table. It's a F.A.T mat, dude. It rolls great. Oh, I like my box. I'm like, all right, whatever. Okay. Can you move your box out of the way now so I could, move my rhinos? Okay. So, yeah, it's just to each his own,
So, all right. Well, that's great. Again, Doug, if there's nothing else you wanna talk about, I just want to say again, thank you so much for helping us out with this. And
no problem. I'm glad you guys like the mats.
Hopefully we drummed up some interest.
Hopefully, and you can check it all out at our partners. TableWar's partnered with Reese and Frankie over there at Frontline. That's how we started this Kickstarter. Partnered with them. They're our marketing and distribution partners for this F.A.T mat. So if you want to buy a F.A.T mat, you can go to their website, frontlinegaming.org, and check out our whole line. We've got all of our private press ones there and stuff like that too.
I heard that Reese designed and built all this. I thought
all the mats.
Yeah, I thought he did all these things. No, I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing with you. All right, great. Snorri, do you have any other questions?
No, actually, I don't. I think we covered just about everything. So
right.
I guess it's time to just say, get ready for some messages, and we'll be right back.
All right, take care, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks a lot, Doug.
Thank you.
Yep.
This is Rob Sanders, and you're listening to the Masters of the Forge, where the world of 40k comes to life on your tabletop.
The Forges of Ghorok by Adam Fawcett. The Cipher. The Arc Cruiser Primus Code stalked amidst the violet and crimson clouds of the Hera Nebula. The stars here were ghosts in the ether, illuminating the billowing vapors and scattering radiation in a haphazard spectrum, rendering the vessel all but invisible. The nearest of those stars glowed fat and red, gorged from eons of feasting upon the nebula's gases. A small planet once known as Shatara was the hungry star's only surviving child, and it was suffering from an orc infestation. Even closer to the world, a handful of small satellites running on barely enough power to keep their entombed astropaths alive transmitted raw data to the Primus Code. From what their translator servitors could divine from the orcs' brutish radio chatter, the tech priests had surmised that the world was completely lost, along with its 3 manufactorum complexes. Magos Dominus Ulivara sighed as she pored over the 17 data feeds scrolling on the bridge's voluminous picked display banks. She didn't have to sigh, of course, not anymore. Her lungs no longer burdened her nearly perfect form. In fact, precious little of her original body remained, though she retained just enough to maintain her individuality and, unfortunately, a sliver of humanity. A porcelain mask and chest plate covered her remaining flesh, while tangled, writhing masses of mechadendrites snaked out of her torso and interfaced with the ship. She was the ship. Whenever the Primus Code glided through a hydrogen cloud, the ship's sensors transmitted the sensation to her human brain, which translated as a faint, warm breeze. The memory of cool wind on wet skin, hair prickling up on goose flesh, a splash, someone laughing. The memory faded. There was not much left of her memories from before the Omnisci's embrace. She was better for it. She droned. 57,000 feeds analyzed, 84 remaining. Prepare the vessel for departure and recall the observation drones. Her secundus repeated the order. Ulivaris observed in her status feed that the tech priest was seeing to the preparations. Confirmations of the orders began to stack into the ship's logs, while further subordinate orders were queued, awaiting the completion of prerequisite tasks. The Magos paid little mind to these minutiae. It was the sensor data from the observation drones which concerned her. If Magos Ulivaris were to admit she had a specialty, it was decryption. Other Magos had admitted a somewhat emotional jealousy at her ability to find patterns where others could not. She could find a meaning in scraps of code from a number of sources and reassemble it faster than even 100 servitors slaved to a computational chorus. She grudgingly admitted to herself that this knack had faded somewhat with each brain augmentation. Although the Omnicia had blessed Ulivaras with many modifications over the centuries, it had been some time since she'd accepted further wetware. "Belay that last order," she blurted in binary. Her secundus, as calmly as he had carried out the previous orders, began recalling them. There had been a pattern in that last data feed. Background noise. Music. It was playing in the background of one of the Orc transmissions. The Orc, presumably one of some importance, was very upset that the Manufactorum Assembly Alpha was experiencing a glitch in the Vox units through the complex. He was demanding, in a very loud tone, that the technician, or bloody weedy grot oiler, be dispatched to the manufactorum to bloody well fix this racket. The Magos set 25 compilation servitors to the task of finding other transmissions carrying the music in the background. She pushed the data to Tech Priest Kolomaxar to be stitched together into a single unbroken piece. The music was soon filling the bridge's acrid air with its vibrations. Bass shuddered the deck plates, and a crowing voice begged for love. Disgusting sentiment. However, she hadn't been wrong. The bass line was off by a different microsecond of time with each beat. Even when the song repeated itself, each beat of the bass line was adjusted by a nearly imperceptible amount. She pushed the compilation servitors to work themselves into a fever. Thousands of transmissions within, from, and near Assembly Alpha were assembled into a 30-hour string of musical filth, which Ulivaras was able to translate into a single paragraph of text. To the Arc Cruiser Primus Code, urgent message from Manufactorum Assembly Alpha, Fabricator Locum Hexaflare Functional, Standard Template Constructs for Patents SWJ0021K through SWJ0021S. In our possession, in addition to Sitara research records dating back 3,200 standard years. Location, 50 meters beneath Assembly Alpha smelting tunnels. It was clear Hexaflare knew Ulivaras and the Primus Code had been en route when the planet had fallen to the Orcs. It also seemed as if Hexaflare had calculated that Ulivaras would investigate and surmise all possible permutations of recapturing the world and rescuing any survivors before returning to the Forged world for further instructions. He had also wagered quite heavily on Ulivaras' decoding abilities. It would seem, she surmised, his faith had been well placed. Data on patents SWJ0021K through SWJ0021-S, she ordered. The servitors replied immediately, rarely a positive sign. All patents on registered Millennium 29. All other information is access denied at your security level, Magos. Standard template constructs listed as classified and top priority. The tech priest peeled her eyes from the picked bank and affixed them to the main viewport. The red star burned, nestled in the arms of the nebula. She growled. The sound was a sputter of static from her voxcaster. Ulivaras knew the world assembled tanks from various Forge worlds, accepting chassis, weapons, and armor from many different worlds, then assembled them for the specific needs of the local systems. The STCs hidden away beneath even one of the world's 3 manufactorum would likely be priceless. Secure from general quarters, recall observation drones, battle stations. The Arc Cruiser's blood flowed and brought it what it needed to make war upon the Orcs. She felt the millions of souls within the vessel run about with their tasks, from the lowliest servitor to the most important Skitarii commander. Before she finally gave the order to cycle up the engines for the short warp jump, she transmitted a message. She requested assistance from both the Adeptus Mechanicus and the only other Imperial ship, which was only hours away, the Carrion Crown, under the command of Chapter Master of Weltos of the Blood Angels. The Primus Code groaned and lurched itself towards the engorged red star. They spent only a moment amidst the miasma of the Immaterium, but the chronometers reset themselves forward 3 days upon their arrival. The engines immediately began their hard burn towards Sitara. A handful of small Orc vessels attempted to intercept them, but the Orcs were little more than a nuisance to the big Arc Cruiser, which swatted them away with indifferent pulses of lance fire. The engines screamed beneath them, shaking the deck plates and likely throwing countless systems out of alignment. Haste was often a necessary evil, though the risks grew as the ship aged. Dozens of damage reports piled up in the periphery of her attention, but none of them were critical. It wasn't long before Sitara could be made out from the other specks in the void, growing from a pink dot to a disk. "Spin us around for deceleration on my mark," Olivares ordered, then sent a single blurt of code to her secundus. The engines were quieted. Then, across the hull of the ship, thrusters fired, doing their work to spin the ship about on its axis. It did not take long for her to come about. The thrusters of the Primus Code were more powerful than the main engines of any Orc vessel they had encountered yet. When the ship had turned, the main engines fired up again. "Secundus, my goal is to move past the enemy fleet, gathering to greet us above the North Pole, and finally arrest relative speed just beyond them, so that our forearmor and strongest void shields are facing the swarm. Prepare the necessary maneuvers." "Confirmed," he blurted. Olivares committed 8 of her mechadendrites to interface with the 8 different external cogitators, beginning the task of formulating a battle plan. Again she cursed her need for external cogitators, but only for a moment. Her human mind was also working. She had it set to the task of unraveling the tangle of security code which was hiding the true nature of the STCs for which her soldiers were about to fight and die. Shatara was wide enough in the Primus Code's primary oculus to pick out continents and individual clouds when the Bloodraven's battle barge Carrion Crown translated from the Empyrean just outside the system. "Praise the Omnissiah, now we have a fight," she said in the Gothic tongue, her meat brain getting the best of her decorum. The long-range Vox crackled to life. "Battle barge Carrion Crown to the Alt Cruiser Primus Code, respond." A deep voice. Human lungs and vocal cords rarely produced a voice quite like that. Astartes, of course. They rarely put humans in command of their battle barges. "We read you, Carrion Crown," the Magos replied. Her voice over the Vox was her own, recorded centuries ago, the unique waveforms stored for future use. She was always a bit startled to hear it. When she would speak through the implant in her face, it would crackle with static, and had a hollow, tinny quality. For this reason, she rarely used the implant for electronic communications, favoring the artificial voice in the machine instead. There was no room for errors, due to misunderstandings. "How soon can you rendezvous with us?" "Full acceleration burn will bring us to you within the run time of The Folly of the Flesh." Referencing the ancient and ridiculous vid play about a servitor who falls in love with a Magos was a simple but acceptable cipher. The Primus Code would join them within 3 hours. "The Orcs are gathering beyond each pole, Space Marine." She avoided transmitting the chapter master's name or rank over the Vox. It likely didn't matter with the Orcs, but protocol was protocol. "They are beyond my line of sight, but it seems they intend to make a run at us with a twin-pronged approach. It will be costly for them, but they will overwhelm us if they are able to gather enough vessels for the cause." "We will need a beachhead, Primus Code." "We will draw them away from the drop site and tie them up for as long as we are able. We will make them regret their actions against the Omnissiah this day, Space Marine." The Vox crackled. His silence bellied his respect. "Know this, Manufactorum Complex Reclamatus Alpha is experiencing rather strange radiation bursts and gravimetric anomalies. This is to be expected when orcoids desecrate holy places. In addition, the void shields are once again operational. You will not be able to safely insert troops in the Manufactorum proper." "Understood. Though I believe there is a scrapyard surrounding the complex." "Affirmative. It is approximately 5 clicks in radius and encircles the facility. If you land in the verge of the territory, you should be able to penetrate their defenses on foot largely unmolested." "We will devise a plan around that data. I should say no more, but thank you, Primus Code." Sentiment. She appreciated the Astartes chapters who did not engage in that particular human behavior. She chose to ignore it. "The Orcs will not destroy us outright, Astartes. They will want to board us. This should offer you some time, but I will need my Skitarii to put up a proper defense. However, expect some assistance from a handful of operatives already on the planet." "Understood, Primus Code. Good luck." "Luck," she replied. is a myth. The Scavengers. The denizens of the scrapyard surrounding Reclamatus Alpha never noticed the persistent dry smell of oil, iron, and rust on the wind. The field of broken machines were piled high, one after the other, over the centuries. It was hazardous to even walk amongst the ruined heaps, because beneath your feet could lie countless other stacked wrecks, waiting to shift under the slightest pressure and swallow you whole. The piles of junk had grown significantly since the orcs had taken the planet. Reclamatus Alpha had always been a reclamation plant where tech priests and other servitors had worked with tireless enthusiasm to restore damaged holy machines to life. Now, the manufactorum was called The Shop, just as Shatara was now called Ghorok, and the orcs had stepped up production. Although many of the servitors had survived the assault, most of them were now slaves to the orcs, along with many other humans. Even a few tech priests were at the mercy of the shop's new lord, the big mech named Rustbolt. It was rumored that he had done something to their brains, slaved their augmentations to his own, and opened their minds to his. Now the remaining tech priests were totally subservient to the mech and his retinue. Hume Nob Joden and Commissar Neela Holt had a commanding view of the busy warren beneath them. They stood in a sodden, sooty room on the outer skin of the shop. The room had once been an executive office, the workplace of some long-forgotten noble. The huge pane window had long since shattered, so they stood amidst the glittering fragments of civilization and watched the new invasion. The sounds of retro rockets were carried to them on the rusty wind, punctuated by the retort of landing craft slamming into the ground just outside the scrapyard's perimeter. "Damn," Neela growled. "Space Marines." "Indeed," Joden agreed. Joden and Neela, along with their tight gang of survivors, had not only observed the industrious rise of the orcs in the Manufactorum district since the Greenskins had taken the world, they had taken part in it. There was no stopping the creatures. They had certainly not attempted to fight against the rule of the orcs. It was madness to try. Instead, they had turned to the only means of survival left to them: coexistence. Before the Greenskins, Joden had been a crew boss amongst the scrapyard scavengers. They would spend their days toiling in the parched wasteland of once mighty war machines and other devices whose purpose had been long forgotten. The Reclamatus Magos would pay good bounty for some parts. Although many of the scavengers had no idea what most of the parts were used for, the Magos had been competitive with each other, thus ensuring the choice materials fetched a dear price in water, food, equipment, and even thrones. After the invasion, resources became scarce, and the human survivors of Ghorok had been in danger of becoming little more than playthings to the cruel orcs, particularly in the hab zones outside the Manufactorum district. Everyone had heard of orcs in the past. The Imperium had painted the creatures as savages, more of a force of nature than a proper culture or society. It didn't take long for Joden and many of the other scavengers to understand the failings of this false conceit. The scavengers reacted to the orcs' brutality with brutality of their own. Joden built a reputation as quickly as he could, gathering dozens of scavengers into his gang, or mob as the new culture began to call it. He wasn't discerning about those he drew into his mob. He simply needed enough numbers to put up a show of force against the roving packs of greenskins. This was the only key to survival in the new order. "We can't fight Space Marines," she said. It was stated as a fact, not out of fear. Joden felt a twinge of injustice. "We fought the Greenskins. We should fight for what we've built here." "Don't be a damn fool, Joden. We will die. There will be questions. We will resist the questioning, but not all of our mob will. They will talk, and we will die for our heresy." Heresy. That was a mighty word to his ears, even after all that had happened. Jotun's hands began to shake, nerve damage from decades of exposure to throne knows what in the scrapyard meant he had to concentrate on keeping them from shaking. But under stress he tended to lose control. He was afraid, he knew it. Worst of all, though, he was sure Neela knew it as well. True security had been tenuous for some time, at least until he met Neela during a chance encounter on the outskirts of the scrapyard. Within a couple of weeks since the Imperium abandoned Shatara, Jotun had already earned the title Hume Nob from several of the Orc and Gretchen gangs in the region. There had always been danger, though, not only from the Orcs, but from the undisciplined wretches he had gathered to himself. In addition, in order to maintain the veil of strength, he was forced to make truly reckless decisions. Soon his well-armed group of thugs openly raced about the rust stacks in their soot-belching jalopies, brandishing their confidence like an unsheathed sword. Those who dared attack them were gunned down, orc, grot, and human alike. During one of these parades of overconfidence, they pulled up on the Commissar and her growling phalanx of Chimera transports. Jotun had slammed on the brakes of his own lightly armored buggy, ferrous dust billowing forth in a cloud. Kursk, manning the heavy stubber in the cupola above him, cursed and nearly pitched out of the crow's nest. The 5 Chimera were all in various states of repair, but all seemed to be painted rather recently with bright blues and greens. White dags, checks, and orc glyphs were scrawled across their hulls. Some of the pintles were manned by men and women in blue uniforms, some of them even smoking cigars. Through the cloud of dust he watched as the lead vehicle popped the hatch of its heavy bolter turret, and an officer hauled herself onto the hull. She was sporting a smart blue uniform trimmed in gold and white. A deadly plasma pistol and power sword were holstered to her generous hips. She wasn't exactly clean, no one was, but she had a commanding presence, even without saying a word. To this day, Kursk held that it had been the hat. Although the Commissar's hat was rather impressive, Jotun knew it was much more than that. "Hume Nob Jotun," she had barked. Everyone had looked around, as if they had no idea who this Jotun person was. Fat Betty said, "I am Alfarius," prompting a wave of laughter from the mob. A deadly stare from the officer brought immediate silence and reversed every smile. "Reveal yourself, Commander Jotun." Jotun had stood up in the cockpit, gripping the roll cage in as casual a stance as he could manage. "Commander? Please, I'm no yellow-hearted last gunslinger." "You are now, you damned fool. My name's Commissar Neela Holt. I have been looking for you. I should have realized I only needed to find the loudest and most conspicuous group of scrap fleas in the region. I've come to discuss a partnership." "Commissar?" he said. He immediately had his doubts. For one thing, the uniform and the hat she wore were impressive indeed, though they had an odd fit. Surely an officer as illustrious as a commissar would have their uniform tailored to their precise fit. Also, Jotun had met fanatics in his time, and commissars were supposed to be the heralds of the imperial truth, unshakable. Why would a commissar want to partner with his mob of dusty thugs? "Yes, and I'm a bloody traitor now, too, so what a pair we'll make. We'll need to talk." As an allied front, the pair had not only survived, but thrived. The Gretchen mobs and orc gangs grew to respect them. They had heavy equipment, and some among them boasted a deep understanding of human technology that the orcs and Gretchen lacked. Now they actually traded with the orcs, both for goods and services. The orcs of the shop had come to rely on the human survivors of Ghorok almost as much as they did Gretchen. Meanwhile, in the eyes of the humans, the orcs had simply become proxies for the Magos of Reclamatus Alpha. In reality, once they had established their strength, little had changed for them. "What does heresy matter, anyways, if you're dead?" Neela had said to her followers on many occasions. "What are they going to do? Come here to wade through 1,000,000 orcs just to kill us?" It was this sentiment which rattled around in their brains as the drop pods rained from the sky. So what are we going to do? Joden wiped his brow. What can we do? We are truly ruined if we don't act quickly, she replied. Undeniably, he said. But what? You figure that out, Commander. She was testing him. Sometimes Joden actually thought she might really have been a commissar before the orcs came. Still, something about her nature sometimes felt forced, as if she were playing a part. But weren't they all? I suppose we ought to fulfill our obligations to Rustbolt, just in case. We send a third of our mob to fight with them against the Space Marines. The rest of us head north, punch through any attackers with overwhelming numbers, and hide until all this blows over. She allowed herself a few seconds to ponder his words. He could tell she was searching the plan for faults, her eyes darting back and forth, up then down. Agreed. It is simple enough to be flexible and covers our interests with the orcs in case the Space Marines are unsuccessful. Thank you, Commissar, he said. There is no time to lose, though. We must go before they get very close to the shop. We don't want them converging on our escape route instead of the Manufactorum. The Inquisitor. Ordo Xenos Inquisitor Federico Cafone growled. His white and gold metal edifice refused to push forward fast enough for his tastes. It was an ungainly, constant reminder of his long captivity among the orcs of Ghorok. The frustration of being wet-wired into the lumbering dreadnought body could not dull his zeal, however. After many long months, he had returned to Ghorok to exact his revenge upon the greenskins. This was the only vector which remained for him. His physical state made it problematic to return to Terra, and part of him had resigned to the possibility that his mental state was also not quite stable enough to withstand the stress of daily imperial politics. It did not matter, though. Terra and the rigors of inquisitorial posturing held as much interest to him now as the base human activities in which he no longer took part. Therefore, he had remained with the Blood Ravens in the Pekashi sector. The desire in his heart for bloody revenge was masked by the reasonable mission goals of rooting out and destroying the orc threat. Throughout the years, even before his captivity, Cafone had lost track of many contacts and friends within the Inquisition. Until his own recent experiences, he had assumed they were all dead, victims of the Xenos filth which they had hunted. Of course, at least some of them had likely been killed in the line of duty. However, he wondered how many of the Inquisitors abroad had broken contact with the Inquisition and the High Lords simply to do their jobs. How many had cast away the shackles of politics in order to actually accomplish works dying for, without being forced to discuss them in a committee? The Inquisitor, along with the Astartes, light vehicles, and dreadnoughts, emerged from the scrapyard on all sides of Reclamatus Alpha. The ironclad dreadnoughts and Devastator teams blasted holes in the outer skin of Assembly Alpha, with nearly no resistance from the orcs. Some rapid-fire weapons ricocheted off their armor and dug furrows into the chemical-sodden earth. But there were no true defenses without. The resistance from the orcs was just enough to force the attackers into relative cover of the Manufactorum itself. The orc strategy was not lost on Cafone. They were walking into something of an ambush, where the orcs could engage them at point-blank range. He was certain the orcs didn't perceive it as a cunning strategy designed to minimize their own losses. The brutes simply felt it wasn't sporting to be cut down in the open without engaging the enemy personally. Cafone had been involved in the rushed planning of the assault, so he knew the orc strategy wasn't the only thing driving them into the jaws of the enemy. The battle barge and arc cruiser miles above them were fighting a desperate battle against the orc fleet, waiting for the void shields protecting the Manufactorum to be shut down so that the rest of the forces could be committed. The Inquisitor allowed the Space Marines on foot to use the holes blasted in the side of the outer skin to gain access. He simply charged ahead and smashed through the superstructure between buttresses, swinging a wide arc with his adamantium saw blade. A shower of sparks and debris exploded ahead of his emergence. He willed his tornado bolter into life, belching forth a deadly cloud of mass-reactive shells from his left torso. Machinery and cargo containers were rendered to scrap before his advance, and the orcs behind them were similarly reduced to chunks of quivering flesh. Crude rockets streaked towards him and the rest of the attackers, most of them impacting in the wall behind them and creating even more holes. A rainstorm of dust and rust showered over them, tinting their armor and obscuring their advance. Many of the Blood Ravens took advantage of this and regrouped into defensive positions, while their brothers trickled in from the labyrinth of junk outside. Cafone did not see the point. He waded into the mass of green aliens, unleashing his heavy flamer in a gout of Prometheum death. He tore into the rocket-armed orcs first, reducing most of them to ash, then brutalizing the rest with his saw blade and his mighty bulk. Cafone waded through the orc defenses, the unstoppable butchery staining his white carapace first bright pink, then a dark red. When the guns were finally silenced and there was not a single greenskin remaining to exterminate, Cafone stood alone near the inner walls. If he were still flesh and blood, he would have been heaving breaths with exhaustion. Instead, his battle crypt stood hissing and sputtering as excess heat bled off its skin, cooking off the orc blood in a cloud of smoke and steam. Most of the Space Marines in the Skitarii gave him wide berth as they advanced into the meandering corridors within the Reclamatus facility. The Blood Raven seemed capable enough, and more importantly, hadn't dared hinder his mission. When their battle barge had intercepted the distress transmission from the Ark cruiser Primus Code, Cafone hadn't needed to pressure their chapter master to respond. The mission goals were more than enough to push him into action. Any intelligence the surviving Magos trapped somewhere within the bowels of the Reclamatus would be invaluable to their efforts against the Greenskins in the region. Also, any STCs they could recover were likely priceless in the extreme. Cafone felt a small pang of guilt, as he cared very little for these matters. He was secretly glad that he was not chosen to hold the rear guard, or break off from the main group with some of the others on a mission to deactivate the void shields. He just wanted to delve as deep as he could into the facility and watch orcs die, to silence their guttural laughter with fire and saw. "Inquisitor," a voice rumbled, transmitted into his mind from his walking tomb's Vox receiver. He did not respond. The voice was persistent. "If you push your carapace too hard, it will overheat. If it overheats, you will render it inoperable during the battles to come." "Dreadnought," he replied to the voice, "I grow weary of your mothering of me." "I'll thank you to refer to me as Brother Kolos, or simply Kolos, if you please," the Dreadnought responded. Although his words should have conveyed annoyance, his voice bellied something akin to amusement. The Space Marine was also new to his mechanical tomb. He had fallen during the defense of the world only a few months ago. "I wish they had assigned an older Dreadnought to this task, Kolos. One who is far less chatty," he snapped. Unperturbed, Kolos replied, "Inquisitor, please. I still have feelings to hurt." Cafone scowled as much as his remaining facial muscles allowed him, while the Dreadnought laughed quietly in his mind. "I am sorry, Inquisitor Cafone. I choose to speak with you because I wanted to discuss strategy. I know you are new to Dreadnought combat. Well, I am as well, but at least I've fought alongside them in the past." He did not respond, but Kolos went on anyways. "I am not equipped with any kind of real ability in hand-to-hand combat. I can fill an entire corridor with a constant stream of bolt rounds, but you will have to take the brunt of any orc assault. I suppose I'll be able to crush a few of them underfoot, but your impressive claw arm will be far more effective against them. I shall do my best to soften them up for you before we engage. Your tornado bolter will be invaluable in eliminating any anti-armor units the orcs may have before we launch an assault. Cafone was quiet for a while, but replied, "Yes, that is acceptable." Having said that, it is important to wait until given the order to engage. It will be our job to tie up great numbers of the enemy, so that our battle brothers may steal away and complete their mission. We shall have to engage them and fight. A hint of concern was at the edge of the dreadnought's words. I am afraid it's unlikely that we will find our way back to the surface. Certainly, he growled. I trust that you're not insinuating that I am unable to choose death when the mission requires it. No, Federico, quite the opposite. I have sensed your bloodlust. Don't deny it. I have no doubt that your goal today is indeed to finally die. I respect that decision. His voice changed slightly, sincerity creeping in. Truly, I respect it. However, I need to make certain that you will not forego the needs of the mission to fulfill that bloodlust. We need to work together to make certain our brothers can meet their mission goals. Don't be foolish, he replied. I am not suicidal, Space Marine. I do not wish to fall in battle, only to allow the Xenos threat to continue. His insistence sounded forced, even to himself. Kolos had good instincts. Cafone could feel the part of him which wanted to end the torture of his limited existence. He could feel that need gnawing at the fettered edges of his sanity. I will keep the beast at bay, Space Marine, for as long as I am able. My desire to destroy yet more of the enemy shall keep me focused. I can ask for nothing more. A quiet washed over them. The darkness was punctuated by scattered lights in hidden recesses throughout the Reclamat's corridor walls. Flickering PIC displays and malfunctioning sodium arc lights revealed little of their path. Sensors and small pumps filtered his surroundings to what remained of his auditory and olfactory nerves. The sounds of the two converging enemy forces were a dim echo in the darkness. The acrid stink of ozone and death permeated the stale air. Somewhere within these halls awaited the fabricator locum of Shatara and the cherished STCs for which on both sides so much had been sacrificed. Federico tried to focus on this, their mission. It was a noble mission, one that any faithful servant of the Emperor should feel blessed to be a part of. Still, an analytical focus was difficult to maintain. Resentment creeped in. How dare these base creatures spit in the face of the Imperium? How dare they withhold the sacred property of the Adeptus Mechanicus? How dare they disrupt the lives and the machinations of the Imperium's agents? Rage percolated, surfaced briefly, and Cafone pushed it down. He began to growl again. It must have manifested itself through his hull-mounted Voxcaster, because a few of the Blood Ravens ahead of him glanced back. He didn't care. Steady, brother, Kolos transmitted. I am trying, he spat, and I am not your brother. No, I mean you need to focus. Enemy contacts ahead. A pang of joy washed over the rage. Yes, more orcs to butcher. A Space Marine captain held a hand up, fingers splayed. The Astartes taking point stopped, and the squad leaders consulted their Auspex devices. A captain turned. He was resplendent in his frilled helmet and ancient Mark IV Heresy-era power armor. He held a massive power maul over his shoulder. Arcs of energy danced along its surface, intermittently bathing him in blue light. The captain said, Inquisitor Cafone and Brother Kolos, we are few. We need you to take point on the crossroads ahead and hold back the orcs for as long as you can. We need to break through here in order to make it to the lifts to the lower levels. We won't have enough numbers to perform our mission if we wade in with the orcs here. Kolos straightened his posture, his hydraulics hissing. You can count on me, Captain de Leon. Cofone regarded the captain for a moment. Captain, he growled, try and stop me. Several of the assault marines chuckled. De Leon said, Very well. All squads follow me. The attack force came to an open space, which seemed to be a crossroads of sorts, with corridors splitting off in 5 different directions. As the Space Marines and a smattering of Mechanicus forces filed into one of the nearby corridors, the dreadnoughts took a position between them and the other corridors. Sounds of approaching orcs echoed ever closer. Even over his own thin nerves, Cofone could sense that Kolos was suppressing his own impatience. The dreadnought shifted his legs and performed tests on his voluminous ammo feeds. Meanwhile, Cofone was a statue. The rage boiled and fought against his willpower. He would not allow his emotions to control him. He would do his duty. The orcs burst from one of the far corridors in a cacophony of savagery. A wave of teeth, claws, shootas, banners, dim red eyes, and laughter rolled into the chamber, and before them rolled a roaring battle cry. Cofone felt his hip shift and his right leg swing a step forward, slamming to the floor plate. He managed to arrest his other leg with a scream. Cofone's mind shook his burning heart with the inarguable logic that the tornado bolter mounted to his torso could kill far more orcs than the saw blade alone. The huge rack of bolters mounted to his crypt's torso roared to life. A steady stream of explosive shells scythed a brutal hole into the orc assault. He screamed as he killed, delighting in it, quenching his bloodlust, tempering it in a bath of blood and pain. Likewise, Kolos's 4 heavy bolters cast off buckets of spent shells and ripped orc bodies to pieces. Piles of the dead quickly formed in the kill zone between the hallway entrance and their defensive position. The corpses didn't slow the orcs down, of course. In some cases, the orcs were able to use the bodies as cover. A few of the orcs began to trickle past, but the Space Marines made quick work of them even as they filed through. Most of the assault squads and Mechanicus troops had moved on, and Cofone's ammunition was running low, when a massive shape lurched into view from the opposite corridor. A bright red orc dreadnought blurted mechanical orc laughter as it charged their position. Well-oiled joints pushed the giant pile of grimacing icons and snapping claws towards the dreadnoughts. Lacking weapons capable of doing any more than pockmarking the armor of the lumbering beast, Cofone and Kolos simply awaited contact with the smoking heap of iron rage. That assault never came. The orc dreadnought arrested its movement several meters from Cofone and Kolos. It roared in rage and tried to move, but could not. Now that it was a bit closer, Cofone noticed the dreadnought was crawling with Gretchen and several cables stretched from its rear armor into the orc mob behind it. The orcs surged forward. Kolos tried to gun them down with his heavy bolters, but the cover provided by the red monstrosity allowed their foes to wash over him. He swung his torso and stomped his pistoned legs in the hopes of shaking a few orcs off. Meanwhile, Cofone unleashed his heavy flamer on the charging mob and reduced most of them to ash before they could make contact. Brother Kolos, he voxed, let me help you. No, he replied. Keep them back, Inquisitor. We need only a few more moments. Cofone fought with his boiling hate one more time. Rather than wade in with Kolos, he swiveled his torso and poured what remained of his tornado bolter ammunition into the orcs, continuing to file into the room. A large group was making its way down a different corridor, and the orc behemoth was covering their escape. The Inquisitor caught glimpses of a large orc with wires socketed into its heavy, clanking armor. As the strange greenskin moved past, the orc dreadnought positioned itself in such a way as to make the armored mech nearly impossible to shoot. With a dry click, his tornado bolter was silenced, ammunition spent. The orcs launched a final assault on him, washing over him even as he immolated a huge chunk of their number. Both of the dreadnoughts stumbled and were pulled down by the weight of the greenskins piling over them. A large orc bearing a snapping hydraulic claw managed to gain purchase on the faceplate of Kolos's crypt and broke into it, cutting like he was opening a can of soy rations. Amniotic fluid gushed out of the pressurized compartment. The dreadnought fought on, however, thrashing and killing with his massive bulk, crushing dozens of orcs. Cafone cut into the orcs, screaming with rage, glee, and fear, nearly shorting out his voxcaster, which crackled with static. Amidst the melee, a single orc bearing his own spinning adamantium saw climbed over a pile of his dead allies beyond Cafone's peripheral vision. It squealed a cry of victory and jammed its saw into Cafone's carapace, spitting a spray of hot sparks. The Inquisitor spun and roared, enraged. The orc was able to keep himself from being flung away by grabbing hold of the armored Prometheum hose running down the back of the Inquisitor's right arm. The orc pulled himself up and hugged the spindly appendage with both legs and arms. He engaged the saw again and pushed hard against Cafone's arm. The orc's screeching saw blade severed the hose. A gout of Prometheum spat into the spray of sparks. "Yes," he roared. "Die!" Cafone's prison of steel and misery exploded, immolating the orcs with flaming shrapnel, followed immediately by the explosion of the other dreadnought's sarcophagus. The force of the double blast shook the room to pieces. Unrecognizable fragments of plating and machinery poured from above, crushing any surviving orcs. Amidst the inky smoke and crackling flames, silence fell. The orcs and the space marines marched their separate ways, while Ordo Xenos Inquisitor Federico Cafone and Brother Kolos of the Blood Ravens held the line with their burning hulks. The Commander. Chapter Master Revueltas sipped a glass of Amasec in his cavernous personal quarters. The drink's deleterious properties had no effect on him, but he enjoyed the beverage nonetheless. The Astartes scaled tactical station reported 3 after-action feeds and a text-based litany of the battle. He ingested all of these simultaneously, the information provided concurrently and chronologically by his data scribes. He watched as the Mechanicus troops and his Astartes broke into the lower levels of Reclamatus Alpha and uploaded one STC datapack after another. They gunned down orcs in droves. They encountered defiled servitors and text priests fighting alongside the enemy. The servitors were decorated with yellow paint and covered in orc glyphs. The tech priests brandished crude weapons and squealed with mad, broken tech cant. Their behavior was reminiscent of Dark Mechanicus, but different in other ways. The servitors acted as if much of their programming had been erased. What remained of their human minds was allowed to run rampant in battle. The vicious cruelty hidden in the most primordial sectors of the human mind were exposed to the eternal agony of cheap servitor augmentation. They fought for the orcs, and they did so almost as orcs. They reveled in unleashing bolts of death into their attackers, then equally reveled in hacking at their foes in brutal combat. But still they died. It was a great deal of work to bring them down, but die they did. Brothers fell too. Too many. An entire assault squad were slaughtered to a man, their bodies rendered completely irrevocable. Other losses were even more costly. Revueltas watched as his old friend Captain de Leon engaged the orc mech warlord in personal combat. The mech was huge, though not as large as most war bosses Revueltas had seen. It was bristling with mechadendrites and trailing a vast train of cables and wires. As the orc moved through the halls, the mechadendrites would interface with whatever mechanical devices were nearby, as if he fancied himself something of an orc techmagos. It was revolting. De Leon swung his power maul in reckless yet devastating arcs. Against any other foe, his form would have been laughable. However, as a veteran of many campaigns against the green-skinned beasts, De Leon knew orcs very well. His brutal barrage of blows sent the orc reeling. Though its power claw snapped at him, De Leon didn't give the orc any real opening to score a solid blow. The power maul not only broke bones and crushed internal organs, but also smashed and shorted out the orc's bionics. The abomination died with its brains leaking through the floor grating. While the captain dealt with the warlord, their position was being overrun by a huge surge of orcs. Although his Astartes were holding the orcs off at a door which served as a natural choke point, the orcs were able to push their way in on the brute force of their combined bulk alone. De Leon and his men were overrun, pulled down by the tide. Before they could be hacked to pieces, however, a Castellan robot and its minder stalked into the room and butchered the orcs, liquefying them with tech arcane weapons and pulping them with the robot's indomitable fists. Revueltas heard his own voice in one of the picked recordings, ordering a tactical squad to fall back and recover the captain and his bodyguard. The status of these casualties scrolled through the data feed as part of the prepared report. He sighed and swallowed another draught of Amasec. Now, De Leon and 17 other Astartes were lying in stasis under the ministrations of 3 chapter apothecaries and their subordinates. Even 5 hours later, their fate was uncertain. De Leon would need a new leg and arm at the very least. The report was nearing its conclusion. Just as their forces were clashing with a swarm of servitors outside the Fabricator Locum's cell, the Reclamatus Alpha itself turned against them with a sudden brutality. Emplaced weapons came to life and began blasting Astartes and Mechanicus alike. Automated machinery worked against them, trapdoors springing open and furnaces belching sticky promethium flames down corridors. Madness babbled over the voxcasters throughout the facility. Alongside these events, the report of the Magos in command of the allied Mechanicus forces during the battle echoed Revueltas' assumptions. Fabricator Locum Hexaflare was lost, infected by the perplexing and insidious orc code. He had turned against them, and the entire facility with him. Through the picked feeds, Revueltas heard his own voice again. "We have the STCs, and the Fabricator Locum is lost. Fall back to your extraction points. Strike Team Prime, prepare for teleport extraction." The picked feeds faded one after the other as Space Marines and Mechanicus were pulled back to the ships. Only the recorder drone hovering outside the facility remained. Thunderhawks forced their way through clouds of orc fighters, secured their payloads, and launched back up through the swarms. A moment later, all the screens were dark. He leaned back in the huge throne, closing his eyes. Was it worth it? So much equipment could not be recovered, and too many brothers had returned in critical condition or had not returned at all. The battle barge wasn't much the worse for wear. She was damaged, but she'd been hurt far worse before. The Ark cruiser Primus Code, however, was badly crippled. There were glowing rents in her hull, and few of her turrets remained operational. Magos Dominus Ulivaras had offered to stay behind and hold the orc fleet while the battle barge escaped with the recovered STCs, but Revueltas had refused. His real chief regret was that the orc fleet had been so numerous that attempting an exterminatus on the world would have been a waste of time. That hadn't stopped him from launching a cyclonic torpedo, though. As the battle barge and what remained of the Ark cruiser steamed away from the planet, he launched one of the ponderous torpedoes in their wake. Just as the pursuing orc fleet were about to pounce on it, Revueltas ordered its detonation. For a moment, the main oculus on the bridge was nothing but white light. Then, the bright green cloud of plasma dominated their view, setting hundreds of orc vessels aflame. This bought them time for their escape, even the crippled Ark cruiser. A chime broke his reverie. "Yes." A voice replied from the small voxcaster embedded in the tactical station. Transmission from the Primus Code, Chapter Master. It is the Magos Dominus, secured point-to-point channel. It was odd that the Magos had used a secured channel outside of combat, but he said, "Patch it through." The pick screen soon came to life, the Magos' strange porcelain mask dominating the feed.
Chapter Master.
Her voice was different than when he last spoke with her. It was tinny and mechanical. Magos, I trust you were not injured during the battle.
I am not injured. My Skitarii perform their duty with exemplary and exacting skill. The Primus Code will be in shipshape for warp translation before the orcs catch up with us.
Revueltas nodded. Of course, Olivaras. This is good news. The Magos didn't reply. She seemed at a loss for words. Is there anything else?
Yes,
she replied.
I have defeated the encryption in the STCs.
Oh, have you? Revueltas wasn't surprised at the technical feat, of course. Not after seeing her file. What surprised him was the clear breach of protocol, or at least the admittance of it.
Yes, 4 hours ago. I have been debating whether to tell you.
He blinked. For 4 hours? He didn't realize tech priests pondered anything for more than a few moments, let alone hours.
Yes.
He had a feeling he was not going to be happy about the information Ulivaras had for him. Go on, tell me. She bowed her porcelain head, then looked up and spoke with actual human pain in her voice.
The Mark 7 Recaf Roaster. The Mark 2B Confectionery Heating Element. The Mark A117 Amasec Filter. The Mark 3 Small Vehicle Steel-Belted Tire. The Mark 112 Retractable Writing Stylus.
She fell silent. Revueltas felt his teeth grating. His powerful Astartes hand crushed the Amasec glass into powder. Blood and wine dripped from his clenched fist.
I thought you should know, Chapter Master Revueltas. Though part of my calculations on that decision assumed you'd rather not know that none of the STCs we recovered were anything of import.
How?
All of the STCs hail from before the Crusade. It's only a matter of shifting data around and having the STCs marked as highly classified. This might be accomplished by an individual with knowledge of Administratum customs. A bribe or even blackmail of some kind could accomplish this. Over the years, information regarding highly classified STCs begins to naturally disappear. These were marked classified at the beginning of the Fabricator Locum Hexaflare's administration of the manufacturing within the Shatara system 365 years ago. No records remain of what those STCs contain, at least none accessible at our clearance level. It seems that Hexaflare planned on using the secret STCs as leverage to gain assistance if it was ever needed. It seems to have worked in this case.
Revueltas leaned forward. And you considered not telling me this? She pulled back a bit.
Of course I did.
Why?
Many different facts would lead to that decision, Chapter Master.
Her tone bellied her incredulity.
This information might give you and your chapter pause before assisting the Adeptus Mechanicus again. You might expose this treachery to the top Administratum staff, or even the High Lords themselves, thus damaging the station of the Fabricator General and the Mechanicus as a whole. You might even take a cue from some of your less reasonable Adeptus Astartes brothers by coming about and rendering the Primus Code to a burning cinder in space.
Then why did you choose to tell me?
Respect, Chapter Master. And sentiment. Base human sentiment, which I must say I am considering having purged.
Why? So you can be like Hexaflare? She didn't respond for several heartbeats.
Your logic is sound, Chapter Master. We shall see. Now I must return to administrating our repairs. I would like the opportunity to, someday, repay this debt to you and your brothers.
We do our duty for the Imperium, not ourselves. However, I would not turn down an opportunity for my Astartes to fight alongside your Skitarii again one day.
Then we shall monitor communications for signs of that opportunity. Farewell, Revueltas.
Until the next battle, Ulivala.